Hello, Cadre 3. I hope you know who this is. This is your friendly professor, and this is the first of a series of four videos that I'm posting on Blackboard that have to do with our subject for this semester on organizations and systems. This title of this one is Maximizing Organizational Design, and it's very informal. If I decide I want to say something over again, I will. There's no practice. It's first time, last time, and no other preparation, and you can tell I have not spent any time in a makeup room in order to do this video. It is what it is. So without any further ado, maximizing organizational design. And when you see me look away, I'm looking at some notes that I've made, so it doesn't get to be a random spiel that you have to wade your way through. When you think about organizations and systems, there's a number of principles that we could talk about forever. But in this case, there are three or four that we want to identify before we get into talking about maximizing organizational design. Number one, as you recall, and I think we talked about this already, is that organizations do what they're designed to do. A good example is that the way we have designed school, whether it be K-12 or universities, they do exactly what they're designed to do, and in fact they do it very well or they wouldn't survive. The problem with the K-12 system is that it was designed to educate only the top third of the kids, and now we're asking it to educate all the kids and make sure they're also college and career ready. Principle number two is if you want to change what organizations do, you have to change the design. And Stephen Covey probably said it as best in terms of a quote, is that if you want to tweak an organization and have it be more efficient, you simply work on the processes that are part of the organization. If you want to change what it does and the outcomes, you got to change the paradigm or the design, so to speak. Principle number three, if you want to maximize organizational design, you're talking about not the processes, you're talking about the product or productiveness of the organization or its effectiveness, not its efficiency. Those are two different kinds of questions. So, if you want to maximize an organization, talking about what it does and what results it gets, it's the business of dealing with the design or the paradigms upon which the organization operates. So, if you look at what business and industry does to maximize profits, maximize products, to do a better job of selling what they make, they do a couple of things, and they're all about connections of the system to the connections of the system to expand this growing sense of effectiveness and productiveness. One is businesses try to get better raw materials, whether they're making cars or they're making widgets or they're making ceramic components for computers or technology and so forth. You get better raw materials, you end up getting better products. And the second one is then you connect the product to the user. How the user uses it, what the product means to the person, and what's the experience that you want them to have with it. Steve Jobs probably did the best job of connecting to the experience that he wanted the user to have when he invented the iPad. There was no needs assessment done. We didn't need iPads. He simply said, this thing's going to change your life. And the whole tablet computer kind of environment has changed dramatically just since the launch of the iPad several years ago. But it was about the experience. And so, we hear a lot about schools and particularly colleges and universities wanting to change the outcomes that they get more kids there and so forth. And what they're failing to discuss is what's the experience of the student while they're there. If the experience isn't meaningful, kids aren't going to go. Adults aren't going to go. If there isn't some meaning to the outcome, in other words, after you finish it, nobody's going to take part in the process. And so whether it's cars, and cars are a good example, when you see advertisements, it's not about all the bells and whistles on the car. It's about what does it do for you in terms of your self-image, in terms of the person you perceive yourself to be. All you have to do is look at the kinds of advertising about selling trucks, and it's about being a cowboy. It's about being macho. It's about all those kinds of things that caused me to get a new truck every few years, because that's the way I see, that's part of the life that I see, and that's the experience that I want to have. Well, enough of that. So let's apply this concept of maximizing organizational design, or the organization through its design, and apply it to a couple of things that are familiar with us and familiar to us, and that's about school, both the K-12 as well as the post-secondary system. So if we talk about schools, there's no way to get better raw materials. In other words, parents are sending us the best kids they've got. They don't keep the best kids hidden in a closet and prevent them from getting out. They send us the kids that they have. But there is a better way. There is a way to make sure that those raw materials that we get that enter kindergarten are more ready to learn because of the experiences that they've had, because of the structures under which they've had the opportunity to be supervised, and those kinds of things. And so the idea is kids that are more prepared to be part of the social experience of school, and kids that are better prepared to be part of the learning experience, the educational experience of school. So connecting to trying to get better raw materials in the case of the K-12 system, three things. One, you got to connect to pre-K education. In other words, what are we doing for kids birth to 3, particularly those that have disabilities? What are we doing for 3- and 4-year-olds, particularly high poverty kids? What about universal pre-K for 4-year-olds, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds? The second connection is then to child care. And so many kids, and especially in a state like Nebraska, where we have the highest percentage of mothers in the workforce, which means kids are basically in need of child care in the early years, as well as child care probably up until even middle school years. And so it's important that the child care that they have meets some standards of quality. And the research is crystal clear that quality makes a difference when it comes to child care, and we're not talking about babysitting here. We're talking about formal, highly structured child care. And the third connection is to the home, and this is something we don't do well, I think, in schools, is having a clear connection to the school, especially kids whose language is not the same as white middle-class Americans tend to have. It's very difficult for many schools to even envision how do you create meaningful relationships with parents in the home, because kids are going to spend most of their time outside of school in the home or in the community. And so that connection with the home is really, really important. Here, lots of research about teachers being one of the most influential factors in a child's life in terms of their achievement. And while certainly teachers are a major predictor of the kind of success kids will have in school, home and life outside of school is even more consequential. So the kind of community a child lives in, the kind of home a child lives in, has a lot to do with that child coming to school ready to learn. On the other end of the K-12 continuum is what happens to the product, the students, when they leave. Where do they go? What do they do? And so connecting to that end of it in terms of how they use their K-12 experience, or their what they've learned in high school, what meaning does it have, what kind of an experience does it enable them to have once they get out of the K-12 system. And so connection at the 12th grade to continued learning, post-secondary education, community college, technical school, 4-year college, 4-year university, some kind of extended learning beyond high school is an important connection to have. Second connection is to the world of work. In other words, how do you get a job and have a self-sustaining income so that you are a self-sustaining member of society? And then the third is living in a democratic society, community, state, nation, and world. In other words, the connections to learning, earning, and living are very important. And when we hear all the conversation about relevance, this is what we're talking about. We have to make the K-12 experience, especially that in the 7 through 12 years of K-12 of the K-12 system. To make it relevant means it's got to have some meaning beyond high school to continued learning, to getting a job and being a self-sustaining independent wage earner, and living in an adult society, family, community, state, nation, and world. So take a minute and think about that in terms of post-secondary or higher education, in terms of its connection when you think about what would be grade 13 through grade 16, which is the bachelor's degree, so to speak. The post-secondary system needs to be very highly connected to the public schools or to where their kids come from. Public schools, private schools, even home schools, and then of course non-traditional students who are many years out of school or maybe even who dropped out of the K-12 system about re-entering the system at the post-secondary kind of level. The better the connection for the post-secondary system to where its students come from, the more effective, or the more it maximizes the effectiveness of the design of the system. And probably post-secondary is no better, in fact in some ways even worse than the K-12 system connecting to where its students come from. But I hear lots of post-secondary folks talk about those connections, but they're very flimsy and fragile at best. Probably the private schools do a better job of making that connection because their connection is narrower. Universities that attract 5,000 to 10,000 students a year, that connection is basically sits there and waits for the student to make the connection, not from the system to make the connection to the student. On the product end of the side, the connections are really the same. The relevance of post-secondary education has to do with continued learning. And most of the time from there on out, it could be postgraduate work or graduate work and postgraduate work. It could be learning on your own. It could be learning as a part of a role, a professional role or a business kind of role. Then there's also that connection to the world of work, earning a living, being a self-sustaining independent wage earner, and of course being able to live more productively. And hopefully that's what post-secondary education does for people, is help them even better to be a productive member of our democratic society. One of the things that you can see, and I think Doane College probably does this as well, and this is not a commercial for Doane, but when you think about what we're doing with the education specialist and education doctorate is creating a pathway so that we are connected to our students when they begin in the bachelor's degree program, undergraduate program, into the master's, whether it be curriculum instruction, whether it be education leadership, or the MAC program, the MAM program, the nursing program, to say there's a pathway. We want to remain connected to you so that you can proceed on to that highest degree, the doctorate, either by going through the education specialist or by going through a program that is designed for you based upon where you are and where you came from, the kind of courses that make sense to leading on to that ultimate degree. And it's the same thing. We have to make sure that we connect on both ends, connect to where the students come from, which will be a key to the success of those programs. It's certainly the key to the success of what we're seeing right now in the education specialist program, and it will be the key to the success of the doctoral program. One of the things that does is the ripple effect that comes through because of that, in terms of maximizing the organization, is that just the education specialist and the doctorate, particularly the doctorate, once we publicly announce it, I have every reason to believe that there will be an explosion of students in our master's programs, whether they be in the education field, counseling, management, nursing, whatever it might happen to be. And there will be an explosion in the education specialist program because of the pathway that it creates. That's what changing organizational design is supposed to do. So if you want to get different outcomes or different results, if you want to be more productive in the process and effective, you've got to change the design. Otherwise, the organization just keeps on getting what it's always gotten, and that's what it was designed to do. There's a couple, I hope I can get them mounted or loaded onto Blackboard as well, but I've got a couple of PowerPoint slides that if I can't get them attached to this particular video, then I'll load them independently under the same title of Maximizing Organizational Effectiveness, so that you can see graphically what I was talking about in the earlier slides. Well, that concludes this video, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. By the way, I really can't see you, but make you think that I can.